always, if you would like to see the original episode on my second channel, it will be linked below. So for every episode, we will be going over the who, what, when, where, why, and how of the Roanoke colony. So let's go ahead and start with what. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Roanoke colony, let's just go ahead and go over some of the basics of what it is. Essentially, the Roanoke colony, or the Lost Colony, was an English settlement that disappeared without a trace. They just vanished, and to this day, we still do not know for sure what happened to the Lost Colony. Sure, there are plenty of theories and ideas of what happened to Roanoke, but for sure, we have no idea, and it remains an American mystery of what happened to the Roanoke colony. As for the when, this took place in 1587 to 1590. And as for the where, this took place on Roanoke Island, which in present day is off the coast of North Carolina. So who is the colony? As I said, they were English colony, and they were led by a man named John White. He was the governor of this colony, the leader, an explorer, and even an artist. So in May 1587, the colony set sail for Roanoke Island, and they would arrive July 1587. So as soon as they made it to the island, they did start to create their settlement, build their villages, and so on. They did have some conflict with local Native American tribes, and that mostly came from the previous colony that had tried to settle there in the area. They had not been kind at all to the Native Americans, and had already started to create that tension. So understandably, there was a few attacks as they settled in, because the Native American tribes were so used to the colony before that it just treated them so horribly. So just a month later, in August of 1587, John White actually headed back to England. The settlement really wanted him to go back for supplies, food, weapons, tools, and even more people to bring back to the Roanoke Island. So White left the colony, which included about 115 settlers. That also included men, women, and children, even John White's daughter and his newborn granddaughter. She was actually the first English born in America. Now the crappy part about his plan to return to England was the timing. Right as he left for the journey to England, England and Spain began a war. So once he got back to England, every available ship was sent in to fight or into war, and he had no way to get back to Roanoke Island. John White was not able to get back to the colony until August of 1590. That is 3 years later. Now, he did attempt to try and go back during the time period with smaller ships, but it never worked out because of the weather or other various things. So it did take him 3 years to get back to the Roanoke colony. When he finally made it back to the colony, he found no one. Everyone had just disappeared. White didn't find any bodies or signs of death in the area. There wasn't even any signs of battle or struggle of any kind. The only thing he did find was the word Croatoan carved into the fence post, and the letters C-R-O carved into a nearby tree. White had instructed the colony to carve crosses into the trees if for some reason they had to leave the village, or if they were forced out, but no crosses were ever found. Only the word Croatoan and the C-R-O. So having no idea what happened to the colony or his own family, John White actually sailed south to what was known as Croatoan Islands, which would make sense because that's the word that was left for him. Today it's known as what I believe is the Hatteras Island, but once again, it was unfortunate timing on his part. Both times they tried to sail south to the Croatoan Islands, the weather would not permit it. It was too stormy, and after the second try, they headed home to England. So John White left the colony, having no idea what happened to the people. He went back to England and eventually moved to Ireland, where he died. He never found out what happened to his loved ones or where the lost colony went. There was a bit of a search for the colonists in 1602, but the weather didn't allow them to actually make it to the island, and then once that Spanish troops actually killed the colony. They potentially stumbled across the Roanoke colony, and because England and Spain were in the war, they killed off the settlers, or they took these settlers. Another theory is that the colony actually joined in with one of the Native American tribes. Of course, it would kind of suggest that they did in fact join the Croatoan tribe, since that was the word that they left for John White, or at least what they thought was the Croatoan tribe, because there could have easily been miscommunication back then. There was supposedly signs of European influence in some of those tribe locations after their disappearance, things like how houses were built, or tools or items that had the European influence on them, more of how Europeans made things instead of the style that Native Americans used. And in 2015, archaeologists did go to the Hatteras Island, which is where the Croatoan tribe lived, and they found a variety of objects that have those European origins. Things like poles, tools, the end of swords, things like that that had those influences. In 1888, there was a group of the Croatoan Native Americans that claimed to be the last remnant of the lost colony. These people suggested that there was white blood within these bloodlines of those specific Native Americans, and some people have even claimed that today as they go back through their family history and bloodlines. However, DNA analysis has been inconclusive. They can't quite determine if any of these modern-day Native Americans have any ties or DNA that relates back to the Roanoke colony. And we have the theory of zombies. Yes, Roanoke zombies. Was the Roanoke Island the first sighting of a zombie apocalypse? But because it was an island, it was contained to that little area. No bodies to find if the zombies ate them. Or there's the idea, like regular cannibalism, not quite a zombie virus, but they just resorted to cannibal means. They were waiting for John White to come back with a variety of supplies, and it took him 3 years, so did they resort to cannibalism instead? Plenty of colonies have record of cannibalism in their history, so Roanoke would really be no different. So did they eat their friends out of existence? Or, here's a thought that some Native Americans believe perhaps some of the colonists still exist, but they were taken over by the ancient Native American legend called the Wendigo. It was believed that if humans resorted to cannibalism, they would turn into this terrifying beast known as the Wendigo. Could be possible. So, we also have the idea of illness hitting the island, something like a plague that could have killed off the number of settlers, drove them crazy, which would kind of go along the lines of some reports that Native American tribes said. They have in their history of reports that they witnessed the Roanoke tribe kind of going crazy against each other. However, this theory wouldn't explain the lack of bodies, the lack of any proof that there was a battle or fights, or that anything crazy went on the island. They just disappeared. There was no evidence. Let's see, we also have the theory that the settlers moved inland. So as I mentioned, John White was actually a bit of an artist, and he created a map of the area. It's actually a pretty impressive map for the time of how they actually knew how accurately not just the island, but the whole coast of North Carolina was. It was extremely impressive, but anyway, the map is said to potentially hold hidden things, hidden secrets of that nature. So in 2012, they actually did further examination of this map. They used things like x-rays, more modern technology with lights to see in between the map, and things like that. And they actually found that on one of the pieces of the map, something had been covered up inland. Not only had it been covered up, but they potentially used some form of invisible ink. I know, it sounds like it's something from a movie, but they would use it, and you had to use heat or lemon juice to reveal its secrets, so that's kind of why people think John White was hiding secrets on this map. But inland, under the hidden piece, was a blue star, and some people think that that was the site of another fort where the Roanoke colony could have moved inland. But why were they hiding this fact? Why did John White cover it up and then use invisible ink? Were they hiding from the Queen or royalty? witches find them in North Carolina, and then dark magic hiding within the wilderness? Did they use their black magic to harm or make their entire colony disappear? You'll find that witchcraft pops up in a lot of history, but you'll also find that most of the time it's someone that was innocent and that was falsely accused. Other smaller supernatural theories suggest, like, the colonists turned into trees by the spirits that was on Roanoke Island, or that the whole colony was possessed by reptilian demons that lived in the area. I don't know, these are just some of the popular theories. Or some people believe that the Roanoke colony was the site of a massive alien abduction. This would explain why they vanished. There was no sign of them. There was no bodies. There was nothing. The aliens just came, picked them up, took the Roanoke colony back to wherever they came from. Then people relate back to John White's map that perhaps the blue star that was inland from the island wasn't a fort, but that's where the alien ship was. That's where the settlers witnessed its craziness. So did they get abducted by aliens? It's very interesting thoughts. So how is this debated today? Roanoke, or the Lost Colony, has been featured in so many different storylines, movies, TV shows. It's a very popular topic for this generation, it seems. American Horror Story did an entire season that was inspired by the Lost Colony. Also, the show Sleepy Hollow gave a supernatural explanation on why the colony disappeared. Storylines relating to this have also been featured in the show Haven and Supernatural, and those are just the shows I watch. I'm sure there's about a million other shows or movies that have featured Roanoke or gave an explanation as to what happened to these lost people. Besides that, conspiracy theorists still to this day debate what happened to the Lost Colony, and they also reference the word Croatoan. It has popped up in a lot of different history, other colonies, other weird things, even relating to Edgar Allan Poe's death. Croatoan was said to be one of the last words he said. So all very interesting. Like, what is the true meaning behind Croatoan? And as I said today, archaeologists are still trying to do digs on the islands and other locations. Scientists also are still looking into DNA evidence to find if there is any trace of the Roanoke colony in anyone's DNA, and then tracing their family, things like that. We're trying to use modern technology to explain what happened to the lost colony. It is all very interesting, and everyone usually has their opinion of what they think happened to the colony or the theory, but it is a very popular mystery. I personally tend to bounce around with different theories, but I think some of them are very fascinating, like the alien abduction. That would explain it. Just up and disappeared because the aliens took them away. Or something more simple, like moving down with the Croatoan tribe. Or they all just could have died. Or they all just could have died off, moved inland and then died off, There's so many different theories, and the ideas of what happened to these